Welcome to our little September get together here. Um, Pull up the pad. Feel free to sign in or add topics to the pad that was in the email. If anything you want to talk about, or just say it out loud at any point as well, I suppose. Um, so my quick little 30-second spiel of what this is we're just a group of research sysadmins or big cluster sysadmins who use Ceph, getting together to talk anything about it pretty much every once in a while. Um, Feel free to contribute to the conversation. I'm not presenting, just trying to keep things moving along. Um, so I guess to start out, we kind of just hit a few general topics of anybody have recent outages they want to own up to their fault, something else's fault. Since the last meeting there. Um, I've got one. We had a total power outage for 4 hours, and our UPS has only lasts us about 20 minutes. And we don't have generator backups. So the entire data center went down. Um, Overall, 2 out of my 3 clusters came up without problems. The third one, which is the bigger, almost 10 petabyte one, had issues just regarding 2 hosts didn't come up right away. Need a little kick once I got access to it all again. Something just during the boot process hung. The other stuff was just corrupt journals here and there. So I was rebuilding probably 10 journals or something around. They seem to be located mostly on just 1 or 2 hosts. Overall, big outage, but first off, not my fault, which is always nice, and no lost data. It took a little while to figure everything else after everything got up and do a little rebalancing, but it went pretty well overall. If nobody else has any outages or anything, kind of bugs and stuff people fit since the last time we've talked. I didn't see too many critical things over the lists over the past 2 months. At least bug wise.
I added something to the list there in the pad. If people are running 14.2.11, actually, if they're running 14.2.11 or any, I think recent Octopus as well.
Yeah, I saw
some of the OSD map trimming logic is inverted, so it trims too early. But I don't know how critical this is. I don't know if there's basically two there. When it's trimming OSD maps, it looks at 2 different numbers to create a lower bound, like for which value to trim to. And it looks at the OSDs, and it also looks at the pool clean epochs. And I think that because it looks at the pool clean epochs, and I think that makes it fine that there's something broken in which OSDs it's looking at. Anyway, we patched our clusters, but I haven't heard of any outages or anything caused by this.
Yeah, I didn't see any outages either. I saw that in the release notes on 14.2.11. One thing I noticed, I haven't reported it, and I don't really know if it's a bug or just something in my environment yet. My file store OSDs seem to not be cleaning themselves up after PGs migrate around. So I get artificially high disk usage on some. Kind of looked into it a bit. I haven't found like anything in the tracker that seems relevant to it yet, so I might end up having to get some good debug logs and post something about this one. In the end, I tend to just give up on because most of these, they're all like old OSDs that were done with Ceph disk, so I end up just rebuilding with Ceph volume and go on with my life. It's, one or two here or there that it happens to. It's just kind of a bit of an annoyance. But I got an upgrade coming up to 14.2.11 soon, and see if it still happens on that. And if it does, I was going to report it. But I'm also one of the few people still using file store.
Yeah.
I'll get away from it someday. Anybody else got hit any bugs, interesting ones over the past 2 months, or seen something? All right. Next stuff on the list was just in general, how's life with Octopus? Anybody actually move large clusters? Positive, negative experience doing so? I haven't done anything with Octopus yet, so I can't speak to this one.
Well, we have updated our cluster at Ljubljana to Octopus a long time ago. So I reported it already at the last meeting, and we didn't have any issues with it. So it seemed just to work fine. So so we moved 2 more clusters to that, and they also don't have any issues. Though we have some bugs actually, some problems. Let's say not really bugs, or how to describe with kernel client and capabilities when you change when you're adding new pools to the file system, for example, the changes are not propagated to the current client, but I'll probably try to investigate this offline. So it's on some clients it's migrated properly, on some others you have to remount the file system, which is kind of not very good, let's say.
Does that mean that it's caching the pool layout or something like that for the directory and not refreshing?
Not the layout. If you add new data pools, the permissions for those new data pools are not propagated.
Yeah.
So I was just debugging this in the morning and didn't come to a sensible conclusions. For example, on our large cluster, 1/3 of the nodes only see the propagation. The other 2/3 didn't.
Which kernel is that?
It's 5.7. That's pretty recent.
Isn't the name of the pool, isn't that part of the directory layout?
Yes, as well, but the layout doesn't have problems, so you can create the directory, so MDS works fine.
But then on your stale client, if you use fget.
No, it's not stale. It's not, the client doesn't come stale, but if you want to write to the new data pool, then you have a read or write error. So OSD's permissions are not seen in the client as the server. There's something wrong with the kernel client, let's say. The module. Very strange, but anyway, I'll probably report it back later on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is strange. Dan, it looks like you were wondering about Nautilus and the gateway.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, just because tomorrow we're going to upgrade s3.cern.ch from Luminous to Nautilus. And we've tested everything, and it should be okay. We already run a second S3 cluster on Nautilus, so I know that it's fine. But I'm always worried about the way that the Rados gateway, like all the region settings I'm always worried that
Mhm.
like the region settings from one version don't work to the next version, but and it's hard to test that. But anyway, did anybody have a Luminous to Nautilus S3 bad experience or good experience?
But I mean, Dan, I mean, when Raoul did Luminous to Nautilus, I guess that we should count it as a good experience. I mean, we don't have massively heavy usage of our S3 endpoint, and I'm not aware of anybody making use of the region features or doing anything complicated with it. But I mean, we do, there's certainly a lot of internal use cases where people are dumping, log files and things, and then we have a growing number of, genuine users that are trying to sync data across from their normally on-campus experiments with various random things that they download off the internet because it works with Amazon, and
Yeah, exactly.
they are, we ask them what they're doing, and they're like, "Oh, I saw this, and I downloaded it, and it works fine." And you're like, "Okay, well, there's several of them. None of them had problems when we did it, so it's not exhaustive." But
Okay,
seems to be being interrupted by my 3-year-old here. I'm sorry.
no worries. She agrees. She agrees. I suppose no problems from the upgrade. He or she. Okay, thanks for that.
When you say you're upgrading to the gateway tomorrow, are you doing just the gateways, or are you doing all the OSDs and like the entire cluster in one go?
Yeah, the whole cluster in one go.
Gotcha. Well, good luck with that. Sounds like it should be fine.
Think you'll see on the mailing list if it doesn't go fine.
Yeah. I'll make sure to load that up tomorrow morning and see what's on it.
I mean, while we're on the topic of well, I guess S3 upgrades. I mean, how well integrated is it with your OpenStack cluster? So if you've got users on OpenStack, are there various things that they're using to basically automatically access S3 or Swift? I guess the integration with Swift is better because that's certainly an active topic at RAL at the moment, and people are adding the features to the cloud actively because there's the demand from the users that want to be able to, they've got projects with an OpenStack and they want to just be able to create containers and automatically that would be in the S3 cluster. I don't know whether that is have I jumped ahead of the schedule with that particular question? Sorry, was the agenda? I don't know how structured the agenda is. Can I ask a question like that, or should I wait for later in the meeting?
Go ahead. That's fine.
I mean, Dan, do you do, or because
Yeah. No, I understand. We have. I mean, so the problem in the past was that if you use. Okay, so yeah, we want the same thing. We have OpenStack. We want users to be able to click on the object store button in OpenStack and manage their EC2 credentials. Also to be able to use Swift, although they don't really want to use Swift. They want to use S3. So they want to be able to create EC2 credentials and delete them and manage their quotas and things like that. So there's an option in Rados Gateway to just do the S3 authentication to let Keystone do the S3 authentication. But the problem is that this adds an authentication hop for every single IO, the Rados Gateway. So it slows things down a lot and it hammers your Keystone. So for the Swift API, there's a way that it caches. The Rados gateways can cache like a token or something like that. I'm not an expert on how this all works exactly, but it's possible to cache it. With S3 credentials, it's not possible to cache it. So what we did was Jose wrote some machinery that basically synchronizes all of the EC2 credentials from Keystone into our Rados gateway. It writes them as local keys, local users with local EC2, with local S3 keys. So then we do the authentication. We use the local plugin for authentication in Rados Gateway, and then that makes it fast. But my understanding is that there's a proper way to do this now, but I don't know how that works. I think there's a better way to do that kind of synchronization now. Is that what you wanted to hear, Alistair?
Yes, sorry, is that an Octopus feature? I couldn't find my unmute button. Or when you said there's a proper way of doing it now, or is that a new feature in the open? Okay, fine.
I don't know. I can try to dig it up and share it later, or maybe someone else knows.
Yeah, I was just kind of looking through the various clusters that people. I think, well, I guess most people, people are using RBD for OpenStack, but I thought I saw somebody else has an S3 cluster as well for that. S3 and RBD storage. That was Matthew Vernon. I don't know if he's on. If they've. Oh no, he's not attached to this meeting. But he did put his information in the Ceph pad, or sorry, the pad.ceph.com thing. Okay, well we'll keep looking at that. Thank you though, Dan. That is useful because we would have probably run into that problem. So we now at least can ask you what you've done, or for the details, so we can stop running into the S3, because we're the same, that everybody wants to use S3 because they've just heard of that. And even when you kind of explain that there's better integration with Swift and it's approximately the same in terms of, well, it's logically the same, they're like, I want to use S3 with this thing that I've seen on the web. I don't know if that's a common user experience people seem to have, or a common experience as a site you have with the users just wanting to basically do everything they have that they can do with Amazon.
Oh yeah.
Like, yeah.
So much, we have a lot of S3 users like that. I mean, so like our GitLab has like 70 or 80 terabytes on our S3 cluster into 2 buckets, like 50 million objects. Actually, that brings up an issue that I'll put to the bugs to be aware of.
And just with the large amounts of files in buckets, because we've had that a couple of times that, a bucket somebody's done something silly and they've written, millions and millions of files, and when they get really big, they seem to be really difficult to manage, and we often, fortunately, most of the time when that happens, it's somebody's made a mistake and you can delete, you can often just delete the bucket. But I kind of worry that there might be a case where somebody, there's a lot of useful information in there, then somebody also writes something stupid, the bucket seems to start performing erratically, and then it takes a real effort to actually clean up all the, because you're having to do lists and things to find the objects that shouldn't be in there and to delete them. I don't know if anybody's had similar kind of experiences with that, or is that just, is that possibly something to do with the design of the cluster, if we need to put the shards on faster disks and things to get it to be more performant? Because you mentioned, if you've got 50 terabytes split between 2 buckets, and it's GitLab, so I'm assuming they're mostly small files of the kilobyte range that are going in there.
Yeah, so we haven't noticed any operational problems, except 1 month ago we have automatic resharding disabled, and 1 month ago we decided to reshard the GitLab registry bucket that had 32 million objects in it, and the users use rclone, synchronize that bucket onto another 3, just as a backup. And they found that after we resharded from 32 to 512 index shards, their backup process doesn't complete anymore. They have a 1 hour time limit, and now like they benchmarked the list operations, and the lists are like 10 times slower after we resharded. So then I was reading through the Nautilus history, and I found that someone just implemented some kind of optimization for like highly sharded bucket indexes like that. Because the problem is that when you have so many shards, when you do a list operation, the Rados gateway asks all of the shards for their first 1,000 entries. And because the list operation is paginated 1,000 entries at a time, but to get the first 1,000 entries sorted alphabetically, it has to ask all of the shards for their first 1,000. So if you have hundreds of shards, you end up with hundreds of thousands of entries to sift through and then sort. But then in Nautilus, there's some kind of optimization for this so that it doesn't send so much traffic around the network. And I haven't tested it yet, but I'm hoping that that's better.
So is that automatic, or is there a flag that we need to set to?
It's automatic.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm hoping.
Well, we can have a look, because I mean, what you described is exactly, we've got people syncing large amounts of stuff over the place, and then we see, hundreds of shards, and then they start saying it's
slow.
It's slow because or they start complaining that listing files is slow.
Which version are you running?
So, well, Nautilus, or do you mean the exact version?
Yeah, because this landed in one of the recent point releases. I'm not sure which one.
I'd have to check with Tom. But it's interesting that we're not the only people to experience that. It's not just related to the hardware or whatever, and there may well even be a fix for it, or an improvement at least.
So I was wondering if how well the Ceph balancer is working for people in upmap mode. So far, in my experience, it does good at first, but then everything kind of drifts away, and it doesn't do much after I add more OSDs into the cluster, or I tweak the settings a little bit, and then it remaps some stuff, but in the end, everything kind of does end up getting a little out of balance again, and it just sits there saying there's no optimizations. Just wondering if, in general, for you guys, is it working well, or is it just something I'm doing wrong with it, that it's not doing a good job?
Well, for us, so our cluster has a pretty high load all the time. So we have disabled it because we noticed that it runs too often. And also for the balancing, we went quite high, let's say, quite low with the, let's say, standard deviation with the requirement. So in this way, it stays typically well balanced pretty long time, so several weeks, unless some disk goes out and so on. So then it's thrown into bed and it has to be run again.
Yeah, so it's just
for now it's disabled on the large pools, let's say.
So you're just doing the occasional manual run when needed with it.
And the same goes with this new feature with the resizing of the placement groups. So it was also too aggressive. So it's nice if you have a small pulse so that you don't allocate too many placement groups at once. But when you have large pools, it's typically better if you do it manually and disable the scaling.
I just put, I think the key setting is upmap max deviation, because the default is ±5. So you can still have you can have OSEs that are 10 PGs away from each other, and then the balancer says it's optimized. Right, that's the default setting. So check that you have that one.
Yeah, I have to look back to see what.
So you can do ceph config dump to see what you have.
Yeah, I think. I can't remember if that's the one I was playing with or not. Like I think that might be the one where I saw people going sub 1, like 0.5 or something on the lists or whatever to get
1 is the
balancing.
minimum. 1 is the minimum.
Maybe I messed with something else then. I'll give that a shot. Cluster after the call. So one other thing I had a question about was anybody using Ceph CSI, not necessarily in relation to big clusters, but in general with just Kubernetes and integrating Ceph with it. Has anybody actually used that one yet? Because I'm still using like the old RBD provisioner from a couple years ago, which works great, but definitely seems like the CSI method is the way to go, and I'm going to be rebuilding my Kubernetes cluster real soon.
Yeah, you will use that with RBD or with CephFS?
RBDs. Actually, probably both.
Yeah, we use it. We use it. I mean, I don't really know anything about it because that's a different group, but they use it. And the only thing is that it was like tricky. Like we had to tell them to set different options, like fuse options for the Ceph clients for CephFS.
Yeah,
and it was like tricky. It was tricky for them to set special options like fuse big writes and like the auto reconnection settings that we like to customize. So I think that they added some stuff to Ceph CSI to make that all like configurable. So that was the only, but otherwise it's fine. You just have to make sure that you can pass the settings that you want.
Yeah.
And I don't think it worked with kernel last I checked, but maybe they fixed that. I think it was only fuse mount, or is it both? I don't know.
Interesting. I know in general, Kubernetes should work with the kernel one. That's how I'm doing it now, just with a standard storage class that gets mounted around. Or whatever. Yeah. Oh, maybe I'll have something interesting to say in 2 months about that one. I got the hardware here. I'm just waiting on some networking to get the new cluster up and running. That kind of concludes the topics list. If anybody wants to add anything else to it quick, or go freeform if you got anything you want to say, now's the time. All right. If there's nothing else, thanks for joining. A little smaller group today, but I saw, and I remember if got a few emails about people being out. Makes sense. It's the end of summer. Might as well take advantage of it. Otherwise, the next one should be 2 months. November, like 25th, probably. Yeah. I'll send out the usual emails, I don't know, a week ahead of time. We'll talk to you all then.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yep. Thanks for joining. See ya.
Okay, bye.
Okay. Bye bye.